Hey everybody, and welcome back to our channel, Bohol Duo. In this video, sorry about that, we're going to talk a little bit about the next test I had done on for my heart. It's in regards to the angiogram. So if you're wanting to know about the experience and the cost, then stick around. This video will shed some light on that. Okay, so this was after I already did the video on the ER. You can check out the full video on our channel. The second test we had done was the echogram slash stress treadmill, and you can check that out on our channel also. So after both of them tests was done, and I had the treadmill test, it come back with abnormal. So cardiologist was a little bit concerned. Said probably the next thing to be 100% sure would be have an angiogram done. But she didn't push it. She said it was up to me. Chances was the treadmill, it looked like there wouldn't be no blockage, but it wasn't 100% conclusive. So after talking about it and debating on it, I decided for the peace of mind I would have the angiogram ran, especially since heart disease ran in our family. So for my peace of mind, I decided to get it done. So we went down at the ACE Medical Center, again, where the cath lab is located. And we went down and we scheduled it. They gave us all the instructions, what to do and everything the day before and that, and what time to show up. With mine, it was a little bit more complicated since I have a kidney disease. So they told me I had to hydrate in order to have it done. Plus, they would have to use a lower percentage dye so that it wouldn't affect my kidneys as much. So the day before to be hydrated, I had to drink like 3 liters of water the night before and had to flush out and everything to make sure I was good and hydrated. So I did that. We showed up the next morning. We got there about 7:45. They opened up at 8 o'clock. So we got there a few minutes early to Ace Medical. So we waited for the workers to show up and the nurses. So once they showed up and they opened up the unit, then they got all set up and then they called me in. They took my statistic, did my blood pressure and that, and my oxygen level, checked everything out to make sure my blood pressure and everything was okay to be able to proceed with the test. So after we did that, they said everything looked okay and I could go back in the room and change into the hospital gowns. So I went back in, got changed, and then told them I was ready. They brought a portable bed over to the outside the changing room, told me to get up in the bed and lay down, which I did. After that, they wheeled me back into a small type room, I guess like a prep area, where they hooked up and blood pressure to monitor that and checked, put on the oxygen thing to monitor my oxygen level. So the first thing they had to do was I was going to have to be hooked up to IV for hydration. With my problem, they decided my kidney doctor said that it would be better if I was done while it was hydration. So first thing they did was prep me to hook up an IV. So the nurse was very professional and told me all about it, what I was going to experience. The place was real clean, so I wasn't worried about that. And they did a very good job. So she prepped me. She put in the IV lead, then she hooked up the hydration bag, and started the hydration. So, and told me, they would be getting me ready. The doctor still wasn't there. And once the doctor was there, she would come in and talk to me and explain the procedure and everything and see if I had any concerns. So once they got the hydration started, next thing they did was prep me where they was going to do the angiogram at. For me, the first thing they would do was say they was going to try to go in through the wrist. They either go in through your wrist or your groin area. So they prepped my for that groin or the wrist area. Then once she got that all done, she put in the lead net that they would be using for it. And then after that, they told me to lay there and relax, and they was waiting for the doctor to come in. So for me, the doctor who's on call happens to be my cardiologist. She oversees the cath lab there at Ace Medical. So for me, that was a good thing. My doctor was right there and on call. So she came in, talked to me, explained what would the procedure, what all would be done, how long it would last. And once she did all that, she asked me, did I have any concerns? So I didn't. And so she said, okay, when they set up the room and that, once they got set up, they would take me back in there so that I could have the procedure done. So I guess it'd been about maybe like 15 minutes or so. They set up, they came back in and told me that they were ready. So at that point, they wheeled the bed that I was in into the cath lab, and they put the bed adjacent to a table that was on there. They got their own permanent bed there in the cath lab that you use. So the next thing they had to do was they had to transfer me from the temporary bed I was in over to the bed that they use for the cath lab. This one is I was a little concerned about. So I was wondering how a couple of nurses was going to pick me up and move me over to the bed. But what they have is they had like a big plastic board and they shoved it partly under my body, then told me to roll to the right side and they slid it under there a little bit more. Then once I was in position, they had four of them that grabbed a couple at each end and they slid me across the board and transferred me over to the table. There was no problems there. They was professional and looked like they'd done it several times before, so there was no issue with that. So after that, they prepped me, hooked up, got the IV all hooked up, put on a blood pressure cuff and that to monitor my pressure while the procedure was being done. My doctor was in there talking to me while they prep the thing. They take your arm and they kind of like you put it straight out onto like a little stand so that you don't move your arm, and they set it down there and that's where they work at, and they kind of like had a little blockage, little type curtain so you didn't get to see what was being done. And they asked me, did I want to be asleep or did I want to be awake for it? I told them, well, I could be awake, but they still sedate you so that you don't really, you're there, you're not asleep, but you're not really feeling anything. You're kind of like there in la la land. So I guess to do it, they get started. So if you never had a cat thing done, so once they have it hooked up, what they do is they make where they was going to go in through your wrist, they do like a little slit and they feed like a little flexible tube through your arteries and thread it all the way up to your heart. Once that's in place, my doctor told me they're going to inject the dye into my system and that I may feel a little warm from it and that. So they ended up injecting the dye and that into me. And it did feel a little bit warm, but not bad. And they asked me how I was doing and was I feeling okay, and was I feeling anything? Was the sedation okay? I told them everything was fine. So she said, okay, we'll continue then. So what they do is once the tube and that is threaded up into your heart, they inject this dye into your veins and that. So the dye allows them to see what is going on through your arteries, your heart valves, and all that. They can tell if there's any type of blockage or narrowing of the arteries and that. And they do is they take pictures at different angles so that they can see going in and coming out. And that way they can see all your main arteries to tell if you have anything or any type of blockage or anything. So this went on, this procedure probably took about, I imagine I was on the table about 25 to 30 minutes or so. Then once they were almost done, I happened to be looking over. I could see them pulling the plastic tube back out of my arm. And once they got that out, then my doctor, she came over to the side and said that they were done with the procedure and that everything went well. There wasn't no complications from it. So that was a good thing. And she said, we would discuss it farther later on. So she had a call and had to leave. So after that, they had to transfer me back over to the bed. So once again, they got the board out just from the opposite side, did the same thing and transferred me back over to the bed. Then they unhooked my IV hydration and that to take with me, and they wheeled me back into the little room where I was at, where they prepped me at it. So I said I was going to have to stay in there for a while until the anesthesia wore off, and that way I wouldn't be sedated, and to finish the hydration bag. So I guess I was in there for probably about another 30 minutes maybe. Nurse came in and out, checked on me, did my blood pressure readings, jotted them down and monitored it all. Then they had an assistant doctor on call there also. She came in and talked to me and said everything went okay, and just general asking questions, how I was feeling, did I feel it from the procedure, did everything go okay, which I told her everything went just fine. I had no issues with it. So after that, I guess we stayed in there for about another 30 minutes or so, and they came in and asked me how I felt, and I told them I was feeling fine. So they said, okay, then we will start taking out your IVs and that. So they shut the bag off, disconnected the hydration bag. Then they removed the IV place from my arm that they fed it into, and bandaged that up so that it wouldn't bleed. Then after they got that done, then they went over to the side where they actually inserted the tube and all that and did the procedure from and removed that. Then they bandaged that up and put a little bubble like pressure thing on it and wrapped some things around it to apply pressure to get it to clot and that, which takes a little while. So once they got the pressure on there, they said they'd be back to check. So I guess they came in about every 15 minutes or so and checked the thing to see if it was still bleeding. The first couple of times it still had a little blood coming out and that, so they applied the pressure back and rebandaged it. So I guess after about an hour, this finally stopped bleeding, and they turned around and said, okay, that's fine. So now we'll bandage you up so that you can go home. So they put a bandage on and they tape it up quite a bit heavy to where you can't move your arm, your wrist through your thumb and all that to kind of like isolate your movement, because you're not supposed to do a whole lot of movement after the procedure. So they got everything all taped up and told me that, go home, take rest, rest the rest of the day, gave you a little something, told me to, if I get some pain, take some Tylenol and that, and then put some ice on it a couple of times a day or whatever, and stay rested for, said I couldn't move around, no type of lifting or anything for 24 to 48 hours, just to take it easy. Wasn't allowed to drive or nothing, so I couldn't get on the motorbike and drive or anything because of it also. So after that, we everything went fine. Came home, followed their instructions, and they gave me a follow up on it and told me to come back in the following Monday morning. So that was 3 days after the weekend. So after that, we came back in, met my cardiologist there. She took me back into the cath lab. I didn't have to go to her office. She skipped all that and just took me straight into the cath lab. And she turned the computer monitor around, and she actually showed me what they were looking at and showed me all the arteries and everything and let me see that there was no blockage. Everything looked fine. There was no type of narrowing or anything. She showed me all the different angles, said that everything looked great, and she was satisfied that there was no blockage or anything like that. So that put my mind at ease, and I asked her, could I start walking and exercising again, which she told me I was going to need more of after it was done. And she said, yeah, that would be fine. Just start out slower and don't push it. So everything ended up turning out great. I didn't have any type of blockage or anything. The hospital and that, the staff was great. The doctors were great. I wouldn't be concerned if you had to have it done there. They seemed very professional and ended up, I will tell you what, let me get here and see what the cost in that was. So after everything, after doing all the prepping and all that and doing the procedure and all that, the grand total of cost for this ended up being 101,000 pesos, or 437,000 pesos ended up being the cost. So in US, you're looking at about $1,750 is what it ran to have this done. Not sure what it costs in the US, but I have a feeling it would be more than that. If you live in the US and you've had this procedure done, let us know down below in the comments how everything went for you and about what your cost was in the US, or if you had it done in another country, let us know about that. And also, while I was there, in case worst case scenario, I'd got prices, so I'll let you know if it would have been any type of blockage and they would have had to put a stent or something in to give you an ideal what your cost would run, because this is where you start getting into a whole lot more money when you don't have the insurance. So right here, the cost for one stent, if there's no problems in it, everything goes according to plan, you're looking at the cost would be 360,000 pesos. That would run you about $6,200 US. So you're starting to get into a whole lot more money. And if you had to have two stents, then you're looking at another, run it up to 475,000 without any complications. So you're talking about adding another, if they had to do a second one with no complication, you're probably going to be looking at closer to the $3,000 range. So I hope this will give you an idea on the test and what some of the cost runs for something more complex without having to go into having heart surgery or something like that. So I hope this video helps you out, gives you an idea of some of the costs for the test, and I hope you appreciate this, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye.